Hey again. Let's go ahead and finish up on chapter 21 right here. Um, Describe the neural control of adjusting cardiac output and peripheral resistance, okay? Now, we've got to go to the brainstem itself. We'll think back to the function of the brainstem, and yes, I expect you to remember this right here. The function of the brainstem right there is to regulate heart rate and respiratory rate. We have, let's just concentrate on the heart rate in this chapter right here. Heart rate right here has a plus and a minus. It has a cardiostimulatory center and a cardiac inhibitory center right here, okay? Now between the actions of these two, we have a normal heart rate. Now, what system is it that's going to regulate, that's going to increase the heart rate itself? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? What system is it that's going to inhibit the acceleration of heart rate, okay? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? You figure that out and you tell me. Okay, now, that's the neural control of the cardiac center right there in the brainstem right there. Now the vasomotor center, also in the brainstem right there, regulates the diameter of the blood vessels, all right? So this is the heart rate center in the brainstem right here, and the vasomotor center. Now most of these centers right here, most of them are cardio, well I have to say, most of these are vaso, a better word, since it's vasomotor center, better use the term vaso. Vasoconstriction, right? Vasoconstriction. Now most of these are adrenergic receptors. What is the neurotransmitter for an adrenergic receptor? Adrenergic adrenaline, okay, that's the way that you get that. Now, if it's, now that's I'll put a plus over here, right here. So, if it's vasoconstriction, it's going to be through the release of adrenaline. Now, we do have a few vasodilator centers. I mentioned earlier that the way that you get vasodilation is to not stimulate the contraction, okay? But we do have some vasodilator centers. Remember, that's hyperpolarization, way back when, hyperpolarization right there, through the release of a neurotransmitter called nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide regulates vasodilation, all right? Regulated by the vasomotor center. It's either stimulatory or inhibitory. If it's inhibitory, it's going to be nitrous oxide is a neurotransmitter that we have right here. Now, those receptors are, let's see, cholinergic, because they're going to have acetylcholine also. But nitrous oxide and acetylcholine are going to be your vasomotor inhibitory centers. The adrenergic receptors in the vasomotor are vasoconstriction, or your stimulatory centers. Now, that's the neural control of heart rate and vasomotor activity, the peripheral resistance, the diameter of the blood vessels. That's what I want you to get out of that. Okay. Baroreceptors. List two locations. Well, they're the same damn place that the chemoreceptors are located. They are in the aortic arch and the carotid sinus. Excuse me, the aortic arch and the carotid sinus. That's where they are. Now, what do? What do? They measure barometric readings. Well, kind of. Blood pressure. They're going to measure your blood pressure. So what we're going to take a look at is the homeostasis of blood pressure, highs and lows, and we are 21-14. Short-term and long-term cardiovascular responses in reduction for blood pressure, right? Reduction or an increase in blood pressure. Let's take a look at, it doesn't matter, doesn't really matter right here. What's going to happen when the blood pressure goes up? What's going to happen as a result of hypertension? I don't like this. 21-14 doesn't float my boat. 21-15 does. 21-15 does, right? So take a look at 21-15 right here that we have. Normal range of blood pressure. Remember, that's 120/70. Mainly it's the systole that's going to do this. The systolic blood pressure right here. Homeostasis is disturbed, rise in blood pressure. So this is hypertension or hypotension. Hope you guessed hypertension, right? So let's go to the top part of it. Hypertension right here. Homeostasis is disturbed right here. Baroreceptor stimulated. Remember, they'll have a certain frequency, a certain distension when a normal amount of blood comes through, this bolus of blood, this handful of blood that comes through. When it's greater, their signals are going to increase. When the frequency increases right there, that's going to trigger a hypertension. Now the hypertension is going to trigger the baroreceptors. Now let's see what happens as a result of that. Cardioinhibitory centers are stimulated. So as a result, the heart rate's going to slow down. So the cardioinhibitory centers, the heart rate's going to slow down, so it's going to cut down on the effect of adrenaline. It's going to increase the effect of acetylcholine through the parasympathetic intervention through the vagus nerve. Okay, so the cardioinhibitory centers are stimulated. The cardiac accelerator centers are inhibited. Well, how that makes sense. If you're going to increase one, you're going to decrease the other. All right. Now, the vasomotor centers. The vasomotor centers. If your blood pressure goes up, what's going to happen to your blood vessels? All right. Take a look right here. You're going to, if you maintain the same diameter, your BP is going to get higher in the circulatory system, in the systemic circulatory system right here. So you're going to have vasodilation occurs. So three things that are going to happen right here. The cardioinhibitory center is going to be stimulated. The cardiac accelerator system is going to be inhibited, and vasodilation is going to occur. All right. Decreased heart rate, decreased cardiac output, vasodilation right there, homeostasis restored. So, if you'll learn hypertension, then the opposite is true of hypotension, okay? The cardioinhibitory center is inhibited, the cardiac accelerator center is stimulated, okay? And vasoconstriction is going to occur. It's going to be just the opposite. So learn one for hypertension, and the opposite for hypotension is true. That's what I want you to get out of this right here, okay? Now, that is the homeostasis of the blood pressure itself. Heart rhythm during inhalation and exhalation right here. Yeah, I want you to look up sinus arrhythmia. That's going to, just look it up, define sinus arrhythmia. That's a normal change in the heart rate whenever you breathe. It's a normal change in the heart rate whenever you breathe. You look up sinus arrhythmia, answer that one right there, and you got it. I promise you, okay? If you have trouble finding it, you ask me. But your heart rate is going to change every time you breathe in and every time you exhale. If you're diagnosed with sinus arrhythmia, it just means you're alive. That's all the hell that it means. I've been diagnosed with sinus arrhythmia, and I've been so happy just to see the damn thing. I didn't know they paid any attention to it anymore. Anyway, sinus arrhythmia, it's changing the heart rate when you inhale and when you exhale right there. And you look up sinus arrhythmia and answer that one for me, and I'll be happy. Okay? Chemoreceptors, same place. They're going to monitor, well, they're going to be in the aortic arch and carotid sinus. That's where they are. They're going to monitor the blood pressure, monitor the chemistry, the blood chemistry of itself. They're going to monitor the concentration of CO2, and they're going to monitor the acidity of the blood. All right, let's see what we have in here. Okay, let's see. Chemoreceptor reflex. Oh boy, 21-16. All right. Now let's take a look at this right here. Normal pH, normal O2, normal CO2 levels in the blood. I'm going to start right down here at the bottom. Now, we're going to abnormalize it, all right? Homeostasis is start elevated CO2, which is hypercapnia. Elevated CO2 levels, decreased pH. Well, when the CO2 goes up, the protons are going to be produced through the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. You may remember that right there. So the pH is going to go down, the acidity is going to increase right there, and O2 levels are going to decrease also. Now, there's a reflex. The chemoreceptor is going to respond. What are they going to do to this right here? What are they going to do? Well, you got to think about, if my CO2 level is up, how am I going to lower it? I'm going to blow it off. Let's see if we don't have a link between the chemoreceptors and the respiratory rate. Let's take a look right here. Effects on cardiovascular centers right here. Oh, well, let's go to the top right here. Respiratory centers in the medulla are stimulated, and I'm going to blow off my CO2. So I'm going to hyperventilate to blow off the excessive CO2, okay? Maybe not to the extent of panting right there, but my respiratory rate's going to increase to blow off the CO2 to get those levels back down to normal right there. Now let's take a look and see what happens to the pH changes, all right? Now, effect on cardiovascular centers right here. I'm going to stimulate the cardioacceleratory. I'm going to inhibit the inhibitory, and that's what it says right here. And then I'm going to have vasoconstriction occurring. Vasoconstriction occurring. I have a blank on that one right there. Okay. I want to accelerate. Well, maybe my blood flow is decreased. Must be decreased because the blood is kind of pooling someplace. It's pooling because the CO2 levels are going up, the pH is going up, lactic acid is being formed right there. So I've got to increase the flow of blood. To increase the flow of blood, I got to have vasoconstriction. I hope that's what it says right here. Vasoconstriction occurs right there. Okay, that's the response to the chemoreceptors. Okay, increase your respiratory rate, and an effect on the cardiovascular system. Cardiology, it's going to increase your heart rate. Right? Think of this way that it increases the heart rate. Cardio accelerator center stimulated, cardio inhibitory center inhibited right there. Vasoconstriction occurs to increase the blood flow to the tissues. Okay? Now, looking at an increase in CO2. How is an increase in CO2 associated with an increase in respiration? An increase in CO2 is hypercapnia right there, okay? Well, for me to show you that, let me show you this right here. All right? CO2 plus H2O forms H2CO3, which breaks down somewhat, is associated somewhat, into a proton and a bicarbonate. All right? Now,